Well, welcome to the Sunday recap on our Vine Talks podcast. My name is Dre Clark, and I am joined today with Dr. Doug Page, our senior pastor. And Doug, you were out this weekend at family weekends and spent some good time with your family, so I had the privilege of filling the pulpit for you and really coming in on a Sunday after a really hard week in our culture, in our country. And so yeah, it was a Sunday that I think was good for all of our church. I know we missed you, but glad we're back together today for the podcast.
Yeah, I think it was great. And of course, I was able to watch the service from a distance and, man, really appreciated the way that you dealt with the topic we had at hand, but was so apropos for what was going on in our culture.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about, I love the illustration of the chess game at the very beginning and what is God's move, and God always has a move. But I'm not going to preach the sermon again. Why don't you tell us? Why don't you give us a recap of what happened?
Yeah. I thought of that analogy early on, just kind of looking at the week, and I felt like a lot of people just felt the spirit of defeat and the spirit of loss in our culture with Charlie Kirk and everything going on. And so, that's one of the pictures. I'm an art guy, and so I like photos, and I've had that one in my files for a while. And so you get this picture of this devilish figure who's playing chess against this young little kid, and the kid is just defeated. All the chess pieces are taken away from the young guy. And you have this world champion who looks at this picture for hours, and he recreates the chess game, and he takes the losing position with like 3 or 4 pieces and defeats. And so,
love that.
Yeah, and I think that's just a good picture because that is our hope in Christ.
That's right.
Whenever we think about Jesus, whenever we think about the cross too, you get this game, right, that God's doing that's so much bigger than what we can imagine. We think in this small finite world, but He is infinite. And so we walk through what is God's game plan. What's His plan? What are the moves that God does? And really we kind of recapped a little bit of Jesus is the great prophet. And He's the great prophet not just because He speaks for God, not just because He's part of the plan of God, but He is the plan of God. Colossians and all these verses, Ephesians, are going to say that He is the creator. He's the designer, that there's nothing that happens on this earth that Jesus is not aware of. And so He's the great prophet, and He is the plan. And so He comes in, and we talked about how He is, He's not just the house, this passage in Hebrews, where He's not just the house, He's not just someone who's coming into this world to be a good idea, but He is the designer, He's the creator. And so the point that I really want to draw out was that Jesus is the center of our faith, not an idea, not a movement, not a vision for what life should be. I think that's oftentimes we think of Christianity, we think of all of these things. It's a person.
Right.
And then we looked at, what does this person do? Well, he's not just this prophet, he's not just this designer, he's the center of the story, but he's also the one who's going to come into the story and sacrifice himself. So he's our great priest. And why is he better than any other priest? That's because he is the one who's going to sacrifice himself. He's not a priest like all the other ones who kind of are on the sidelines that are advocating constantly, trying to point people towards God. He's God Himself. He comes and He takes our sacrifice. And so I brought this idea how He's in the line of Melchizedek. And so this idea of, you get in Genesis 9, God says there's a people that's cursed because they're not following Him. They're not part of His plan. They've chosen the wrong team.
Right.
And they're cursed because of it. But in this cursed people, God raises up a guy named Melchizedek. And he's this priest and this king. And it says that Jesus is in the line of Melchizedek, that He's a priest from a cursed people. So He's going to become a sacrifice from a cursed people. He's going to become a curse for us, and He's going to take our punishment. And then the last move that He has is this move of being unmatched as a king. And so this is really where we get our hope. We look at Hebrews 12, you look at Philippians 2. After His sacrifice, after He dies for us, after the cross, Scripture is clear that He is given a higher name. He's given a higher position, the highest position, and He is ruling from that position. And so His rule looks different. It's not the way that we think the game often should be played, but His rule is eternal. His rule is among our people now, and ultimately we hold one day He's going to come back and His rule will be fulfilled on earth as it is in heaven. We pray that prayer all the time. So look at these 3 moves, these 3 aspects of Jesus, and then I ended with just this illustration of look at Jesus in times of difficulty. Whenever you feel like the game's losing, know that Jesus plays the game different. And so I had everybody get out their phones, light up the cross, and just say, light is this idea of shine light in the darkness on the story of Jesus. And then the temptation is to not do that. The temptation is to focus on ourselves. And so I had everybody try to take a selfie on their phone. Whenever you take a selfie on your iPhone, it turns off the camera. And so all the lights go off in the room, and everyone's now looking at themselves. And so it's the same message we've been saying. Are you going to look at Jesus? Are you going to look at what He's doing? Are you going to look at yourself? And just being invited into sharing his story, his hope. So that was kind of the sermon in a recap.
Yeah. So we've been talking about this for almost 9 months.
9 months.
And really leading to this. And as we were talking a little bit earlier, I felt like the message was like a foot plant. And what I mean by that is, if you're playing football and you're running and you see the enemy right here, it's like you foot plant and turn. And I think that was great for where we are in our culture today, because you very clearly pointed everyone away from themselves, that we shine the light toward the cross, toward Jesus. And I do love the idea of Melchizedek. And one of the things you said that I loved, at what made him differently, is that after Jesus, sacrificed himself, he sat down.
Yeah.
It's done. And I just thought, what a beautiful picture of what makes Jesus distinct. Many things, but in this case, when you look at the priesthood, he was done. It is finished, which we heard from the cross. So I can only imagine there are a million things you could have done. You took Hebrews and went through it, and I thought, wow, you really did a great job, because Hebrews ties us back to the Old Testament as well. But if you had had another 10 minutes or so, what would you have shared with us?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff. This was definitely more of there wasn't a singular text that I was looking at. I was looking at a lot. And Hebrews spends several chapters making that point that Jesus is greater than Moses. He's greater than the angels. And it's because his work is the ultimate work. And so, and I think that, a couple things I would have spent more time on would have been even just this fact that, and I tried to lean into it a little bit, but I think oftentimes we don't believe that truth. I think oftentimes we look at our faith, we look at our world, and we keep saying, okay, God, what are you going to do? I think sometimes we look at our own lives and we say, what am I going to do? How do I get through, And so all of those are this state of something else needs to be done.
Right.
I need to be better. The world needs to be better. Something needs to change.
Right.
And I'm really sympathetic with those thoughts, because, once again, the story's not over. Jesus is coming back.
Right.
But I think we got to be careful whenever we take those thoughts and we move it onto something that Christ has already done. So where are the places that we can look through our life, look through the Christian story and say, this has been accomplished? When we look at evil and brokenness in the world, it's like even with grief. We don't grieve as those without hope. And I think it's really easy to get discouraged. I think even in our own sin, it's really easy just to feel, man, I'm not good enough. I'm not doing good enough today. And we can get discouraged because we're not looking at the accomplished work of Jesus.
Well, and what we're doing is just what you said at the very end. We're looking at ourselves.
That's right,
And we're saying, how can I do this? And I become the middle of this story.
Yeah.
We don't mean it to be, maybe sometimes, but it happens. And we think, well, I need to do this or that. Jesus paid it all, as the old hymn says, and it is that finished work. And I love how you ended it again, how you just you kept pointing us toward the cross. It is about Jesus, and this is the story. But one of the things that hit me during the message as I'm listening along is that you had said that Jesus was God's plan. Jesus was from the very beginning. God knew this was it. And I know you've had this question a zillion times, but I think it would be great for us to hear. I think sometimes if I were God, I might have thought, I would do it this way or this way. And sometimes when we look at the suffering of Jesus, he knew from the beginning that his son would suffer like he did. It's kind of hard to put together. And so you think, why is it that God placed this as part of his plan from the very beginning? Because Jesus was the plan from the very beginning. And on this side of it, we can look at it when we consider all the prophets and the things that are said about him. But what is it about this plan? It just seems hard to grasp.
I'd like to take it all the way back to the first story. In Genesis, you have man and woman, and you even mentioned in Philippians this idea of grasping. And they're grasping to take control of things. They're grasping to be God. They want to live life the way they want to live life. And so the first sin, the fall of humanity, the reason everything is broken is because there's this propensity inside of us to focus on ourselves and take control. None of us are good at that, though.
That's right.
None of us. This is the story of Job, one of the oldest books in the Bible. I think we maybe skipped over it in our series, but this idea of none of us are God. None of us are that powerful. None of us should be. And because of that, whenever we try to hold on to things that are way bigger than us, things inevitably fall apart. And the depth of that is more than I think we can comprehend. The depth of us trying to be God without the ability to be God leads to brokenness, leads to injustice, leads to suffering. So the way that the New Testament is going to talk about this is the penalty, the wages of sin is death and brokenness. And I think that along with that comes suffering, comes pain, comes all the things we have. That's the reality that we chose as humanity. And every time we sin, anytime we rebel against God, we are adding to that story of suffering and brokenness. We are part of that problem. And so why does Jesus come into it? So I want to be clear. He's not the author of suffering. He's not the author of evil.
Right.
But he does allow us to choose it.
Yeah.
And then the real kicker for me is then, well, why does he decide to come in? If all he has to do is die, why does he go ahead and suffer? I think it shows the depth and the breadth of his love for
Beautiful.
us.
Yes.
Galatians 4 is really clear that Jesus, that out of all the times that God could come, it was the perfect moment.
Right.
What's the perfect moment? Whenever they had perfected shame and torture on the cross.
Right.
Jesus could have come in 2025 and got hit by a bullet.
Right.
And been real quick.
Right.
But he chose to come in. So I think God chooses to suffer, if anything, just to show us he doesn't just want to die for us.
Right.
He wants us to know that he wants to experience us. In fact, Hebrews will make this point that he is a priest that's not unable to sympathize with us.
That's right.
So even in our suffering, God doesn't run. Even in our broken moments, God always seems to lean in. So why does he do it? He chose to. Why does he allow suffering? He must believe that going through suffering produces something in us.
That's right.
That's going to be another biblical message.
Right.
And so he doesn't run away from our suffering. He actually engages. He becomes flesh.
Yeah, I've heard it said too that if you look at how great and how heavy the sin was that we brought into the world, how great a sacrifice it needed, the suffering to pay that price. Yeah. And so the suffering of Jesus, yes, it was prophesied and it was from the very beginning. Yeah. And without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. But as you said, the suffering part of it. And now he understands. So anything we go through, we can understand, maybe not exactly what we've done or the sins or the temptations we have, but man, that he suffered allows us to understand that he looks at that. And, I think of like even in suffering, I think we need to set the context. We see suffering and these terrible things happen in our world and we think, well, God, where are you? Okay, let's begin at this baseline. Yeah. There is suffering in our world. Yeah. Now, what do we do next? And I think the way you ended the message is not turn toward ourselves, but let's keep pointing toward Jesus.
Yeah. Well, that's the way Hebrews ends. After this whole argument of him being the greater than all these things, this unmatched greatness, let us draw near. And I think that's the thing we have to fight through. Is in these times, we have a God that we can draw near to. Yeah. He's going to be sympathetic. He's going to understand what we're feeling. He's going to understand who we are. We don't have to stray away from that. Because he's been there, he knows it, and not just this external suffering, but he became a curse. He who knew no sin became sin. He went to the cross. And I had someone say it's not just he had a bad weekend, right? He accomplished something for us, in many different ways. We could talk, hundreds of messages on the cross and not cover everything.
That's right.
And so, Hebrews says, lean into him, and I think that's what we do in any kind of brokenness, any kind of suffering, any kind of hurt, any kind of shame, any kind of guilt. We focus on Jesus and not ourselves. Yeah.
Well, I love the way you summarized it because if we go back, we say, what was God's move? He sent his son, Jesus, who is the unmatched prophet, priest, and king. And that just encompasses everything when we now look toward Jesus and what he did for us. Absolutely. It was a fantastic message, very needed. We're about to shift a little bit, and we're going to look at the book of Acts over the next several weeks until we get to Christmas. And so I think you and I are the same way. I like having a clear text that we're using. Yeah. I mean, jumping around's fine, and we've been doing that a lot, but I love having, this is the book we're going through.
Yeah, where do we go from the cross? All this stuff, it's all, like you said, from the Old Testament to here, it's all put together. And now, where do we go from here? And that's what we're going to walk through the next few weeks or months as the church.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you again for doing that. I love the sermon.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And that'll start next week, our going through the narrative of Acts. And so we want to invite people back at 10:30 on Sunday and, of course, at 9:15 for life groups. And just be a part of the church. Get connected here. Come and be around the message of Jesus every week. It's going to continue on and be shaped as we walk through the early church, and hopefully that'll connect to our lives. So it'll be a good season ahead of us this fall, and invite people just to continue to walk with us. And of course, we'll hope to see you again next time on the podcast. See y'all.